Remember without being prompted. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We have a packed agenda this evening. Item 1 is to receive apologies for absence.
There have been no apologies, Chair.
Okay. I believe we have a substitute this evening.
Yeah, Catherine Glover is here as a substitute.
Thank you. Item 2 is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the 26th of November. Does anyone have any issues or errors in that? Can I have a show of hands? Excellent. Thank you very much. Next item is declarations of interest. Does any member have any interest to declare in any item on the agenda this evening? Nope. Usual rules apply. If you find you have an interest to declare, do so at the first opportune moment. Next item, public question time.
There are no public questions and no member questions, Chair.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, on to the first of the main items this evening, which is the Corporate Service Medium-Term Financial Plan for 25 to 28. Just before I hand over to officers, this is in lots of different attachments to the agenda. So all of the normal documents we've had for the previous budget meetings are in the same here. They're just presented in a different way. So what I'd like to do is, as we've done with previous meetings, start with a presentation, go through the standard introductions, take questions as we go through, and then move on to if any member has any questions to ask on any of the attachments that were part of the pack. As we're doing so, I'd like to try and keep it in directorate order if we can, or capital bid area, depending on which part we're looking at. And what I would ask colleagues, for the benefits of everybody in the room, is if you have a question, if you can kind of clearly articulate what document you're referring to, if it's in a second part of the document. Good evening, Pauline. And then we'll just keep going through in the normal way. Right, I'm looking to the left-hand side of the table. First of all, to Stephen.
Thank you, Mark. You're all by now, I'm sure, very familiar with the background to this set of budget papers. Councils across the country are facing very serious financial pressures. Councils of all political colours are struggling to cope with those financial pressures, to a large extent generated by increasing need for services, especially adults and children, social care, where we find demand or need outstripping income. Wokingham faces additional pressures, as again you're all very familiar with, I'm sure, caused by the low level of government core revenue funding, which leads to a very heavy reliance on the council tax. Now, this set of papers before you this evening is the latest instalment, I think the last instalment, of a look at the finances of different areas of the council and their savings, growth and special item proposals. Our officers have worked incredibly hard to secure savings and generate income. It has been an enormous amount of work for which I'm personally very grateful. But in some areas, we of course have to spend now to save later. And investing to save and prevention work and early intervention are absolutely vital to controlling future costs. So when you see special items or you see growth bids, many of those are generated by a desire to save money in the longer term. We're very keen to hear any suggestions that members of the committee have got, especially on savings and income generation, of course. So that's what you need, I think, from me, and I'll hand over to Graham, if I may.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Just to reinforce that, yeah, this is actually the fourth airing of the budget, and there will be one more, actually, Stephen. There'll be a January, I think it's the 20th, that we'll come back and we'll pick up any loose ends. And when I say loose ends, that will incorporate the local government finance settlement that may come out tomorrow. If not, it will be the day after. But I'm pretty certain by Thursday evening, we will know. Obviously, I'll then need to digest what all that means in terms of our assumptions and calculations and gap, and work with the executive to come up with, respond to whatever that says, and then present the proposals back to this committee in the same way we've presented the story to date. We're using the same format, templates, approach, criteria as used for adults and children and place and growth. And this is just picking up the tail end, which is the corporate bids. And under corporate, we include resources and assets department and chief executives department or directorate. Page 14 sets out the agenda and starts from page 16. So it starts with similar format, starts with specific risks, then goes into the revenue bids, then goes into the capital, and then again, chief executive, specific risks, the revenue bids, and the capital. And similar to the previous sessions where they have the capital bids or the bids have been previously approved, rather than redesign a whole new bid, which is focused on the new ones, then we've copied the previously presented bid to save all the work of redoing what's already been done. But for completeness, they've been added to the list of bids. But there's a big strap line that says these are a replication of what's previously been reported to overview and scrutiny. The one other point before really I want just to open it up to yourselves is that there was a question, a previous ONS. It was actually all the way back in the beginning of October around workforce, the workforce numbers, the workforce budgets, and that has been circulated to this committee separately. So that has been circulated to address those questions in the same way that I've covered off other questions previously that have come through. Other than say, well, tonight, obviously I'm here representing resources and assets in particular, rather than the strategic position. Sarah Morgan is here very thankfully from my perspective, because there's an awful lot of capital bids that has Sarah's name attached to them. So Sarah would know the detail much more intimately than I would. And obviously we have Sally representing the Chief Executive's Directorate, and Glyn, who might know a few things about IT to support Sally, and obviously Rachel from a councillor perspective, and by all means, Rachel, you can pick up from me if you want. And I just give apologies from Imogen, who has a work commitment she couldn't get out of this evening. And I think that's everyone. Okay, page 17 details the risks as set out. Well, what I would say actually in terms of the last bullet point, the Berkshire-wide business rate scheme, I think the chances of that are increasingly remote, but I would say probably from a strategic financial position, the risk of a business rates reset from 26, 27, well, it will happen. It's just the impact it will have on the council in the context of Wokinham's perceived lack of need arriving from the alignment to deprivation wrongly, in my view. we may well suffer from an equalisation of business rates from a national perspective. So that's one to watch out for. I think the others speak for themselves. So happy to take questions on risks.
You comment solar farm income to continue to come from equalisation reserve. What's that? What do you mean?
Yeah, okay. Probably, I think it was about 3 years ago, we actually baked £1 million savings target into the budget. So we took the credit thinking that at that time that the solar farm completion was going to happen at the end of that year, or certainly very early in the following year. Then we had a horrible surprise that could be delayed many, many years, and we fought hard to bring that back to 2026, which means we will be running up, and you'll see it in the reserves that I presented to this committee. There's a negative reserve called the solar farm, so it means we're dipping into a reserve with no money to pay for this £1 million credit to the council taxpayer, which would be quite alarming if we didn't have the assurances and the mobilisation that we do have to, first of all, deliver, and the security that we have got the ability to switch on and connect in 2026. But we also are very confident that £1 million per annum is going to be a very modest target, and we think it's even possible we might be near £3 million. So similar to some of the other equalisation funds we've had, being RE3, for example, they go into a deficit while you kind of take the credit, and then you the benefits in future years pay off, and hopefully will generate a move to a credit quite soon in terms of the medium term. And then we can up, I think, that contribution of £1 million once we've squared off that reserve. Okay, page 19 is the summary, and then page 20 lists the savings. I'll just do savings, just do revenue in one go. So savings revenue, growth revenue, and special items revenue. That's page 20, 21, and page 22.
Great. Any questions on those first 3 pages? No. Okay.
Okay, then.
Moving on.
Yep. Okay. Then we move on to the capital for resource and assets, which moves into detail on page 24 and page 25. Page 26 provides further explanation where there haven't been bids, because the explanation is intended to cover the bid.
Jane.
Yeah, it's small number in the scheme of some of the numbers in there, but investment in Shoe End, I thought we were looking at whether we should be in Shoe End.
Yeah. Could you?
Sorry.
That's right. Is it the one that says Shoe End offices maintenance, including
Yes.
new audio visual system?
Yeah.
That's a good point. Okay, a large part of that figure is the audio visual system, which we know does not work very well, to great frustration of councillors. What I can assure you, in seeking to replace, because whatever decision we make, whether we stay here as an HQ or move somewhere else, it's not going to happen overnight. So we do need to do something. But in terms of the solution we're trying to address, we're doing all we can to ensure, spec and ensure that it is a transportable, yes, transferable, transportable solution, so there isn't sunk money. There will be some things that we do have to do to this building, regardless, which if this isn't the building we're going to be in, which might feel like it's sunk money. But there'll be imperatives, things like security. We do really need to address that, and we can't knowingly carry on with some of the deficiencies. But obviously we do that very mindfully and as frugally as we can, but there will be some must-dos that we have to address.
Any more questions on 24 or 25? I think we got down to 26. Pauline.
I was surprised to see that we were liable for bush walk. I wonder if you'd like to tell me a bit more about that.
I remember last year, Sarah went to great pains to be at this meeting, and I answered all the questions for her. So I take great delight to be able to hand this one over to Sarah.
That's a great hospital pass. That's just masterful. Great. Well done.
That's excellent delegation, isn't it? Proves my worth. So the council acquired Bushwalk, I'm going to say 2016, 2017. It was when we were doing the regeneration works up at Peach Place, and the opportunity came to us that retail unit and development was coming on the market, and at the time that it was purchased by the organisation. It is it's retail on the bottom. There are some smaller commercial units on the first floor in some areas of it. It is a Grade 2 listed building. It's right in the heart of the town centre, and as landlord we have statutory obligations to make sure it's safe, but also, given its listed position, also to make sure it's maintained and enhanced and preserved. We have a ongoing capital budget for the maintenance of our commercial stock, but the scale of works required at Bushwalk is over and above that, and would take all of it and not allow anything else for any of our other maintenance for any of our other buildings, which is why this is a specific bid, and those works will then secure its sort of integrity for the next 20, 30 years.
So do we make a profit out of it or not? Bushwalk?
Yes, the majority of the units are let there. They tend to be our smaller, more independent tenants, which are very popular in the town. But yes, it does generate us an income stream. And what we do need to do is make sure that the units remain lettable, both from a health and safety point of view, from an energy sustainability point of view. That's new regulations coming in soon. So we need to do this investment to ensure that we can continue to lease those units in the future.
Sorry to be picky, but income is not the same as profit. Do we make a profit?
I would have to go back and check the numbers and come back with it, because it's all tied up in the town centre portfolio. So off the top of my head, I can't tell you exactly those units, but I can come back and provide an answer on that one.
Any more on these pages? Dave.
Yeah, can we just have a little bit more detail on the project adjacent to Mere Oak Lane, the 769?
You started something now, Graham.
Sarah, by all means, take this one as well. Yeah.
So this is land holdings that the council has adjacent to the Mere Oak Park and Ride, so just adjacent to the 833. It's currently an open piece of undeveloped land. We have been looking for opportunities for better use of that land. It's not generating us very little, if any, income at the moment. It does have constraints on it in terms of development opportunities. It's in the DPZ. It's not a particularly great site for residential development based next to the A33 and the constraints of the DPZ. So what we have been looking at is what commercial opportunities that we could have there. We have done a piece of marketing with our local agents, and there is a demand for open storage. So That's what it says on the tin. It's normally kind of building materials or things like that. And we have now agreed heads of terms with a potential occupier for that. The site does need some investment in it in terms of utilities, creating hard standing, etc., because it's just a field, basically undeveloped land. So what the agreement that we have done is that the council will do some of those works and secure planning consent, and then the commercial tenant will come in and do the rest of the capital works needed, and then they will take it on for a lease of just under 7 years.
Over the other option, except their usage, how?
It is a relatively low impact. It's not sort of your kind of individuals storing things there who are coming and going to their personal belongings. So it should be relatively low impact, but that will obviously all come through the planning assessment, and this is all obviously subject to planning consent, who will and our planning and highways colleagues, I'm sure, will scrutinise it and make sure the impact's acceptable.
Yeah, more than that one. The figures look interesting. So the ongoing revenue saving income. Can you explain this biodiversity net gain payment of 306 grand, and why did it take more than 2 years to generate any income on the investment? And how long does it take to pay back? It must be 4 years.
So biodiversity net gain is a planning requirement for any developer, and that is a mitigation of your impact on biodiversity. The council, as a developer and an applicant into the planning process, is liable for those charges, as is any other developer. So it's sort of an internal charge, really, but it is a legitimate project cost that any developer would have to pay. So that would be it would be a cost from the property team as the applicant to the planning department for the biodiversity net gain. One of the reasons why we're not showing the income is lower in the first years is because the tenant is taking on the capital works themselves. That is then in lieu of some rent reduction. So either the council could have expended the works, which would have been over £2 million in value, and then we would have got rent straight away from day one, or the tenant does the works and that's in lieu of. So that's why the numbers from the income are lower in the first 2 years.
Thank you. So the numbers in the income are 0 in the first 2 years, not lower.
Yes, so that's what we would call a rent-free period. So
that's a long time. How long does the project actually take to create a full car park, or is it more than a car park?
It's more than a car park. It would be the rent-free period isn't determined on the amount of time it takes to do the works. It's determined on the value of those works. So trying to balance out. So if they're expending £2 million, for example, on the works, then the rent-free period is the equivalent of that from a rental income. It's not relevant to the actual amount of time it takes to do the works.
So now I'm confused. So they're paying for the work, and then we're giving them a rent-free period to credit them.
Correct, yes.
So why is there a cost of financing in the first 2 years?
Because there is a small element of capital works that we are doing, which is the bid for the 769,000. So that the WBC has to do some capital works of 700 up to 769 value. So there's a financing cost associated with that. The majority of the works come from the tenant.
I must say this is very untransparent for me, and maybe I'm being thick, but it's not a particularly easy thing to understand in terms of the actual amount we're spending on this and the amount of income we're going to get out of it. So we've got a figure in year one, which is an internal transfer, but it's shown as an income, and we've got interest being paid on borrowings on investment that we're making, but we're giving them 2 years rent free because of the amount of money they're spending on it, but we don't know. It's all very opaque. I wonder if somebody at some point could spell that out so you can be actually clear that we are going to actually make some decent amount of money out of this in a reasonable period, and it isn't worth just selling them the land or doing the development ourselves and paying rent from day one.
I think the actual impact to the council is quite clear in that if we're asking them to pay for a share of the capital and we pay for a residual share of the capital, then the residual share that we pay translates into a revenue capital financing costs. Then we look for our income, which isn't there in the first 2 years because we've given rent free, which means it kicks in year 3 to pay for our ongoing cost of capital financing. I think that's clear. What it doesn't do is pick up the, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? Is this the best, most financially beneficial way to do this? I don't know the answer to that question, so I hand over to Sarah.
Yeah, and that sort of option appraisal the team has gone through, and this is the outcome of the best of those options. So we did look at an option where we did all of the works up front, and then we took the rent from them on day one. That has different financing cost implications. We looked at the option of disposing of the land, whether there was a market appetite for selling it and what that would mean in terms of generating the capital receipt versus an ongoing rental income. And we've gone through that assessment. So that assessment isn't shown in the bid documentation because the bid documentation just puts forward the final preferred option. But happy to provide further information if that's what's necessary. There is obviously a commercial deal here, so there is also limitations as to the detail that we would want to put into the public domain. But if members would want more information, I'm happy to provide.
Dave.
So just in terms of the mechanisms, what's to stop them saying that they spent £1 million developing the land and only spending 500,000? What control mechanisms are in place to stop that from happening?
So the scope and value of the tenant works will be included in the kind of contract documentation with them. I don't know the exact detail, but I know that principle will be there. So if the rent-free period and the deduction is linked to their capital expenditure. So if one goes down, you would expect the other to
Yeah, I was just seeing how that was being controlled in the sense of if it's a case that the fees are agreed and then they pay us the money and we pay the contractors, then obviously we won't lose out. But if we're saying we estimate the value of this project is X and we'll give you a rent-free period of the same value, obviously we could easily lose out.
We would expect them, and we ask people to on an open book basis, so to submit effectively their receipts and show us what they've spent. So that would be part of the transaction and our scrutiny of their works.
Does it say in here somewhere when it's actually going to open? How long do they actually think it's going to take to deliver this? I haven't seen it, but I might have missed it.
I don't think it does say specifically. Obviously, we've got to go through a planning process to get consent, and then they've got to do the works. We are asking for our, oh, sorry, just no, it does say at the bottom of page 47, lease commitment, March 26. So we've got, it's circa 12 months and a little bit from now.
One final question, sorry to keep going on. So the 306 revenue isn't actually revenue to the council at all. I think that's a bit of a red herring, Graham, if I've understood it right. It's just money being passed from one hand to the other. So there's going to be a balancing deficit in planning, isn't there? Or is there some secret fund that I don't know about that the government pay for?
The biodiversity net gain is a payment and a cost in this scheme, so it'll be a credit in the planning books.
Yes, and we had quite a bit of conversation about how best to show that, because it is a project cost. So my department needs to pay that money somewhere, but it's just happening to go into another department of the council. So overall, as it says on page 49, it's actually a nil balance impact on WBC, but it is a project cost to my department, which I need to record somewhere, and I need to ask for that money because particularly in biodiversity net gain, planning colleagues will need to be reporting the income that they receive on that.
So why is it showing in annual ongoing revenue savings income rather than other annual ongoing revenue costs? The top table on page 49. If it's a cost, surely it should be on the row above. It then should add up to 372, unless I'm going mad, not 240.
So I suppose yeah, it is a project cost. So yeah, I don't know, Graham, whether we need to just clarify that presentation, Lee, with finance.
Yeah, we do.
Graham, this doesn't make sense for me. If it's a cost, which I think it is a cost, and I agree with you, it should be in here, then it shouldn't be showing on a revenue line. It should be showing as a cost, which means the bottom of year one's wrong and the total's wrong. But there may be some fancy finances behind this that I don't understand because I'm not a finance person.
No, I'll take the point. We'll clarify that table. Sorry, Chairman. Oh.
I think we have no more questions on that section, so we can move on. Let's miss anybody? No, let's move on.
Okay, I'll now hand over to Sally to canter through the Chief Executive pages.
Thanks, Graham. So starting off on page 29, we've got the risks, which I think are pretty straightforward, but just to touch on the first one there, which I think is, you'll see a supporting bid in the pack. As we've got a significant amount of improvement and change activity going on across the council, corporate services or support services are needed, additional support services are needed to support that change activity. So that's always a real risk and a pressure for us when we're built to deliver business as usual services. And then just picking up the last one, so there is obviously the world of AI, automation of services is changing day by day. There's always a risk for us around needing to keep up with that and making sure that the small pool of IT suppliers that supports local government are also adopting that new technology, and we can then harness it as soon as it gets on the market. But that is always a risk for us. Stepping into the summary slides, so slide 31 onwards. We've got the summary position, and then we've got the revenue savings growth and special. I'll just pause there in case anybody's got any particular questions. And I would just say I've got colleagues as well online, Louise and Jackie, if there's specifics around HR or
Thanks, Sally. Questions from around the room?
That's very simple.
Caroline.
Special items. We're talking about a lot more automation and IT. Does that increase our chances of being hacked or fraud? And I presume we're increasing those.
I've definitely got a view, but I'm going to let Glenn answer that one.
I suppose the more technology you use, obviously, do increase the risk. So one of the things I would say is here at the council, we're kind of like baked into kind of like central government sort of like code of conduct around cyber and things like that. So every year we have to have what's called a penetration test. The name of it is a horrible name, but essentially we are ethically hacked, where someone comes in and they basically give us a report with actions we need to kind of take. So we're always on top of things from that perspective, but also from a procurement point of view as well. Cyber and making sure there's cyber credentials are kind of baked into the procurement. So that means we're not kind of buying any kind of like products which kind of are going to expose any risk. But what I would say around cyber, I'm sorry, Sally, but you're never completely safe. You know, it is a dangerous world out there. It's ever evolving, but we're kind of keeping on top of it. But we've got to kind of roll with the times.
Any more on those 3 pages so far? And if not, we'll just move on. Okay, Sally.
Thank you, Chair. So moving into capital, you can see the as Graham said, the old bids, but also the new bids that have come through. The majority of the capital bids in the Chief Exec's office are linked to data, digital and technology, and you'll have seen in previous overview and scrutiny sessions the same levels of capital requests, and that's again linked to one of those risks that I mentioned at the start, where we need to make sure that our technology is kept modern to ensure we can keep connectivity through to central government, linked to that code of conduct that Glyn Cloud Connection, that Glyn mentioned, and also to make sure that we've got the right versions of software that provides protection across the piece. So again, I'm happy to pause there, and Glyn and I will take any questions on the IT. Thank you.
Mary Louise.
Thank you. Sorry, one question which might stray into commercial issues, so we can just leave it. It's a question of internal capacity versus consultancies or procuring from outside, and I would be interested in something like roughly how much expertise in this are we buying in because we cannot secure our own.
If I start and then Glyn may want to step in, are you specifically talking about IT capacity or capacity across the piece?
Well, across, but I mean, it struck me that here, I mean, because having worked in this area, it can be really, really pricey to buy in that capacity. So this specifically, and if there's anything about wider.
So linking back to some of those specific areas around comms, HR and IT, which is kind of the support services within my remit, we do our utmost to try and recruit short-term contracts. And obviously we've had a real push around reducing agency and consultancy models. And we've been really successful by thinking differently around our recruitment. From an IT point of view, I've been in Wokingham and worked in IT for the past 12 years. We've been really successful around growing our own talent, but that only takes you so far. And when you've got industry specialists to kind of supplement that, then we would absolutely use that. But what I would say as well, that does link to the agency report that we take through to Personnel Board that members in this room will be cited on, and it's about short-term kind of turn off, turn on resource rather than long-term contractual arrangements. But Glyn, I don't know if you want to add.
I suppose our kind of like philosophy, we kind of like to kind of catch our own fish, so we don't like to kind of like have someone keep doing the fishing for us. So that means that we kind of sometimes are doing the projects in a bit more of a sort of methodical, controlled way. That's because we want to use the kind of the resource we got. What we find in IT is there's going to be times when there's going to be need for some absolute specialist resource where you have to bring someone off the street, but that doesn't really work because, like in local government, actually having someone who's got a knowledge of the IT estate, knowledge of the applications, that actually goes further than kind of bringing in that specialist resource. So it's better to kind of grow someone, develop someone, but at the same time you've got a risk then of someone kind of flying elsewhere essentially.
Thank you. So keeping in view the AI and emerging technologies, and what governance structure are we going to put in place, especially around the cybersecurity? Are we going to build it internally, or would we get it done externally?
So we don't talk about our cyber approach in a public forum. We're happy to talk to you offline or through any of our meetings. Thank you.
Pauline.
I'm delighted to see the AI lines in this. Thank you very much. Where do the savings come in?
So we essentially, so AI is ever evolving. We're looking for opportunities. So what we're saying is we've got some ideas what we want to kind of spend the money on, but we need some money available basically to do some real life sort of proof of concepts essentially on some real things. So that's things like in the social worker space, having kind of dictation apps and things like that, having kind of bots on our kind of like website to kind of drive that sort of customer sort of change sort of thing. But we need money to kind of spend on that. Our intention is that this will act as an enabler for kind of channel shift, and that will kind of drive a kind of efficiencies. But what I would say is every draw of money, we're going to be supporting with some mini business cases to prove that there is kind of viability essentially. We're not here to kind of waste money, waste time, but we need some money to be able to kind of draw down on from day one.
And just to add to that one, if I can, what we've done through AI and BI is engage already. So we had our first kind of innovation arena with where we had service directors from across the council and their teams coming to present on ideas, what they'd seen in the sector, best practice about where they thought AI and BI could support them. And I think a real key aspect for us is making sure that we support, as a support service, support the rest of the organisation to deliver the high levels of savings they've already got in the process, and then take it the step further. So it's a real key opportunity for us.
Yeah. So what I've seen what I've done in the past is, I agree with you. You need the seed funding. You can't. I mean, you can, but it's difficult to estimate the benefits all the time. But what I've done in the past is actually kept a tracker of proven benefits. So each time you get a line, you can see that one saved this. You can then give it to either scrutiny or you could give it to audit to keep a track. And then next time when you come for more money for AI, you'll say, these are the tracked, verified benefits. So can I have some more? And I hope that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't say this in a budget meeting, but I fully expect us to be coming back in future years asking for more, because it is going to be an area that's going to be growing and developing, and we've got to kind of roll with the times essentially. I can't talk about suppliers, but what I would say is we are getting quite a lot of support from some of the bigger companies. So you probably can use your own imagination there as to who they might be, but there's going to become a limit where they're going to want us to start to kind of like help to sort of fund some of those activities essentially. But yeah, Sally.
And Pauline, you're absolutely right. So Glyn and I have already had a conversation recently, and we've got a session kind of planned in January that starts to pull out the programme governance that goes with that. That doesn't just include the project plans and risks and issues, but also that kind of real tangible trackable benefits. It's a core expectation of how much Glyn is fully aware of.
Yeah, and I'm sure Graham will be very interested in that. So are you doing RPA as well?
Yeah. Yes, that is. We actually do some RPA or automatic. That's robotic process automations. That's where you're using a computer to kind of run repetitive tasks essentially. So we do some of that at the moment, but we think there's opportunity to kind of exploit that. And I think here on the kind of the customer experience side of things, people aren't going to go in between different systems. You can use RPA to kind of do that sort of thing, but it takes time and it takes people to do it. So that's what we kind of need the money for, really, to invest in that.
Dave.
And obviously this is a huge change in the workplace for everybody. How are you sort of training people to become more comfortable using AI?
So I think in IT, like, we don't have all the answers. So actually, we've actually done a thing that Sally talked about a minute ago, the innovation arena, which is where we actually ask the service areas to come to us with their use cases, so they can, because they're the people on the ground essentially. And also on the data side, we've invested in a thing called the Data Academy, where we're basically upskilling the council staff essentially to become more data savvy. There's actually an AI academy that we can be looking at, and that's one of the things that we're thinking about looking at in the next year, which uses our apprenticeship levy. So it's a way of kind of spending that money. So it's not an, do you know what I mean, AI technology, emerging technology, it's not an IT thing. It needs to be part of our kind of like working DNA, you know, you can't in 10 years time saying that's an IT thing. It's down to you and your kind of like, you know, your ethos to kind of learn that.
I think I would add that for users, a lot of it I think will be quite intuitive. So we do have residents at the moment using this technology, and it is, it's things like the chat bots for when residents want to ask questions. It is just super simple and intuitive to use.
I just had a couple of questions actually, just on AI in general. What are we doing with learning? I mean, I know we're bringing our own people together to say, what do you see on the ground? But what are we doing with other councils in the area? Because I know, certainly from previous experience, there's a number in Berkshire that have already gone some way down some of these paths.
So thanks for the question. We chair a Berkshire-wide CIO meeting. So Glyn and I set that up probably about 18 months ago, where we come together and we share opportunities for learning. We look at different technology sets that are available, but also we're not just looking at what's happening in Berkshire, because actually some of the leading the kind of local authorities in this are across the border. So Glyn and team have been in conversation with others. We're also engaging with some of our kind of industry leaders. So we're part of SOCATIM, Society of IT Managers. It's more exciting than it sounds. We work with the LGA, and also we don't just look at local authority, and I think these are some of the conversations that we'd had with Pauline and colleagues recently. It's really important for us to widen our horizons and look across through to the private sector, to understand the pros and cons, but also the guardrails that they've put in place around AI, because that will be critically important for us. But just to echo Glyn's point, technology is just, the IT team is just the enabler. This is a whole council kind of system shift that involves the data protection officer, the teams, the people closest to the community. So we're really excited to be part of bringing this to the organisation. But for these seeds to grow and flourish, this needs to be supported by all.
So I don't have any issue. I think it's a great enabler of change. And you, as Pauline said, you need some of that SYNC funding up front to be able to develop some of the business cases and use cases down the line. The other part, and because I happen to have done my annual security and compliance training in my place of work, we've now introduced an AI section to our mandatory training for all staff about, there are so many tools and things that are out there, and I know our systems are locked down, but there's a use case for staff about what they can and can't do. They can't just install, etc., even with Copilot and some of the others. And then my second question is, I'll come back to the second question because it's not related to that.
Thanks. So I was going to have to write that down. So yeah, without a doubt, there's an opportunity for us to be able to build that into our corporate e-learning. We're also working across with Andrew Moulton, the Service Director for Governance, who's also our Data Protection Officer, to make sure that we've got the right policies in place, because that's really important for us. That underpins everything on the way, not just what we do, but how we do it. So that's key. And I think the other aspect for that, just to add that extra level of assurance, we have a data information governance group, which is really reps from across every directorate, but at service director level, where Glyn is a part of it, and I attend as they're likely to attend, where we talk about all things information governance, data security and policies. So
great. And then my final question is really, this is, when we're looking at this is all capital bids, and as we've got more applications and hardware, etc., or moving to the cloud, are we seeing a shift from capital to revenue costs as we move to as a person service or per person usage?
Yeah, so at the moment, so one of the bids here specifically is like infrastructure, for example. So that's replacing physical things that we have. So like the access points on the ceiling, the servers down in one of our server spaces. But over time, what we're seeing is it's more of a subscription basis. So actually, we expect to see a drop off in the capital expenditure and an increase in the revenue expenditure, which I know is quite painful from a council point of view. But that's the way the sort of the market's kind of going, and it's not really a tide we can sort of fight, unfortunately.
I'd also say it's a tide we don't want to fight. Part of the modernisation of technology, and I don't want to say that to Graham, part of the modernisation of technology, no, he's very understanding, that we need to modernise our IT estate. We have a cloud first model. We were one of the first unitary authorities to adopt cloud, certainly from a Microsoft perspective, and we want to continue in that vein. There are some products that make that easier than others. But part of our ambition is to become fully cloud wherever possible. But you're absolutely right; it does drive a revenue. It's like leasing rather than buying a car, I would say.
Okay, thank you for that. Any more questions on this section? No? Okay, I'm going to move on. Sally, are we still with you, or are we done on your area? Excellent. Any more questions on this that we haven't covered off, or any of the bid documents you want to go through or look at? I think we've given this a good airing, but I'll go around the room. Pauline.
Just to finalise the conversation about RPA and AI, would you be willing to bring back your tracker of benefits at some future meeting for us to have a look at? Thank you.
So that is, sorry, my head's gone off into AI. Yeah,
just be careful it's not giving you the wrong answer.
Yeah, my head's in the cloud. That's a really good airing on all of those items. Right, does anybody wish to talk about anything else that's on here, or are we happy to push this forward with the actions that Liam has captured? Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. I think that was a really good airing. Usual thing applies. If anyone would like to stay, you're very welcome. We won't bite. Cue the cloud of dust as people sprint out the room.
As chairman, I'm disappointed you didn't bring mince pies, I have to say.
This is very true. I would have done. Unfortunately, Great Western Railway decided not to play ball on my journey home this evening, and I got stuck outside Maidenhead. I apologise to the committee. I'm only thinking of everyone's waistline, including mine. Right, shall we? Right, just while people are leaving the room, this is the end of as Graham said, the principal reviews of all of the financial plans. We know that we're going to have one more go round and up in January after the local government settlement has been digested for how much pain that will cause. Undoubtedly it will. So are there any overriding comments or overarching comments that people want to make that haven't been made in the course of the current reviews that we've been going through? And if not, are we happy that we're just endorsing the comments that we've made in the previous meetings with the actions that accompany those forward through the process with another bite of the cherry in January for the final mop-up? Brilliant. In which case, can I thank the committee for all of the work on getting through those budget review sessions. I think it's been an awful lot of work over the last couple of weeks of meetings, and it's caused for some lengthy meetings as well. But thank you for everyone's contributions. And now we'll move on in that case to the economic development strategy. I'll just hand over to Mark in a second. But again, on this one, I think we have one main presentation, which I think we're going to run through primarily. There are a number of other sections and a lot of other data for both of the next two items that have been put in as attachments. Again, if we stick to the presentation, go through that for questions first. And if anybody wants to ask questions on the agenda addendums, if you can just call out which one you're looking at, give us a chance to catch up. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Pauline. It gives me great pleasure to ask you to settle back for our presentations on the next two items on the agenda this evening. The first one being the economic development strategy and the second one being the town centres strategies. Wokingham Borough is a great place to live, learn, work and grow, and a great place to do business. And without a vibrant economy in our borough, we have nothing. Our aim is for you to review and reflect, please, and I ask you to share any recommendations and/or comments for the executive to consider. And we're very happy to take them via email if you'd prefer, Chair. I take this opportunity also to introduce our wonderful team, and they're going to wave to you from beyond that screen. We've got George, who's present here. He's Director of Places and Growth, and we know and love George. We've got Karen Yeomans, Head of Economy and Culture. Karen, give us a wave. Karen joined us this year, having spent 12 years working in local government, where she led teams involving economic development, regeneration and planning. And she also worked for the regional development agencies and actually worked for CEDA, our South East England agency. which included Berkshire. So Karen has focused on these two strategies and also the Forest of Imagination, which is coming to you next year. So please watch this space. And then we got Nikki Phillips. Give us a wave, Nikki. There we go. Employment and Skills Service Manager and lots of other stuff. Nikki sets up a skills and employment borough-wide network, and all partners now meet every quarter to discuss issues and share good practice. She introduced job fairs back in Wokingham and has run 2 so far and is planning more for next year. She manages the employment skills plans, and especially she's overseen Shinfield Studios and working with the Natural History Museum. So getting the most out of our builds. And she ran events last year, such as the Best Dressed Window competition, small business support drop-in sessions, and the apprenticeship drop-in sessions in our town centres. And Nikki has developed our town centre strategies. And last but not least, Dexter, give us a wave, Dexter, there he is, Economic Development Officer. Dexter joined us back in 2023, and he worked for the Thames Valley Berkshire LEP, and he supported the production of the Berkshire Economic Strategy, Stephen, and the establishment of the Berkshire Prosperity Board, and facilitated our very own Wokingham Independent Business Alliance. And Dexter has completed the hard yards in developing our economic development strategy. So, without further ado, first up is Karen for our economic development strategy, supported by Dexter. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for that introduction. Good evening, everyone, and pleased to be here this evening. I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay, and hopefully get this presentation uploaded. Please let me know if you can see that. Can you see that?
Yep.
Great, lovely, thank you. So I've just got a few slides this evening just to set the scene a bit more for how we've gone about the strategy, some of the key facts, some of the key strategic objectives, and then just some of the thinking we've got about what next. So a 10-year strategy, and we've done a lot of work really engaging with a wide range of people internally, but I think really what we want to do was set this economic strategy really for one where it's an economy for all, where nobody's left out, and I'm really developing on the principles of inclusive growth and community wealth building, and I'll come on to those in a moment. So in some ways it's a different type of strategy in some ways, and I wanted to focus on some of the economic data of why we've chosen that route. But as I said, a lot of work collaborating with Mark's a good collaborative relationships there with our leadership team and their various leadership teams within the different directorates. We've held a number of workshops internally, so really sort of cross the organisation to really make sure that we are gathering as much insight as possible from the many areas that we work on as a council. But we've also worked externally and surveyed and consulted externally with our residents and our businesses. And really this is all about sort of trying to think about how the economic strategy can help and contribute to that early intervention and prevent work, and actually reversing some of those key economic challenges that we've got. But also we think about our role, so the council role, is what I'm calling a key anchor institute. So what we do matters. We employ a lot of people, we have supply chains. How we influence the economy around us is really important. And there are other major organisations, so colleges, the university, those large organisations, the NHS, will all be considered as anchor institutions. And as I said, what we do matters. So why do we need the strategy, and what are those key features that we've got? So on face value, the Wokingham economy is strong. We've got a very high GVA, and that's a measure of the productivity of the economy. But these figures are extremely high and have been growing. So on face value, very good. And similarly, our population has been growing. But you start to dig deeper, and actually these are some of the challenges that come through. So just thinking a bit more about our business base. So first of all, it's a substantial business base, but it is declining. we are now seeing fewer businesses than we've had in the past, and particularly in the IT sector. And that's a sector that we have strength in, but it is actually declining at the moment. So that raises some questions around, do we need to diversify the economy? Why is it that our businesses are declining? We have 5,000 workless households, so we start moving into some of that data of our residents, and that's, I think that's a very significant number that we need to be thinking around. What are the underlying barriers and issues around those workless people? Similarly, as sort of measures of a lower value economy, we've got around 2,500 children eligible for free school meals, and a somewhat higher number that DWP estimate are in low-income households. We've also got around 3,000 people with learning difficulties, and we know there that they face cost of living and financial challenges. And similarly, we have 3,500 carers who are providing substantial amount of care, so that unpaid care, limiting their opportunities to gain higher income. We're also, our economic inactivity rates are now starting to creep up. In other words, we have more people who are economically inactive, and that's been growing quite recently. We also have what I'm calling a foundational economy. So those goods and services that are essential. So whether they are retail or caring, a range of those really important services, around 34%, they often are in those sort of lower level of income. So vital to our economy, but in an affluent borough, where house prices are high, we've got quite a high proportion of those people in those essential services. And then, last and not least, in terms of just sort of some of these key indicators, we've got quite a significant pay disparity, as pay inequality between our male and female earners, with male earners earning quite significantly more than female workers. And certainly, and I've looked around and through a lot of different economies in the UK, and that disparity is one of the highest that I've seen. So something concerning them. I suspect it starts to tie into some of those caring responsibilities, some of those foundational economies. So again, it's about, as we go forwards, perhaps understanding that in a bit more detail. But that paints a picture, in my view, of an economy, yes, on face value is a higher value economy, is prosperous, but that prosperity isn't shared. And I think what we need to think about as we move forward, and that's been the strategy that we've started to develop, that it's very much around that economy for all, where everyone is getting the benefit of it. As a headline, and we're really looking forward to feedback and input this evening, but we've started to position this then as a growing economy. Yes, we shouldn't be complacent. We need to grow that economy, but with a greener economy, as I said, for everyone. So that's led us into 5 main areas to be thinking about. So firstly, and I touched right at the beginning about the principles of inclusive growth and community wealth building. So that's very much that very local, bottom-up thinking, in a very people-centred approach, thinking about how we can leverage on our local procurement policies, if we can do more there, how we create more social value in some of our construction works, how we start thinking about much shorter supply chains, more local procurement, and as I said, leveraging that impact on the anchor institutions. So how do our counterparts in the NHS and other big organisations, how do we leverage on our responsibilities, and making sure though that we are also of serving and a benefit to the community. Moving on to then just some of the other areas, and that would be sort of running theme through the action plan as we develop that. As I've said, we definitely need to be thinking about the diversity of our economy. We are a productive economy, but it's very much centred in a very heavily dependent on the IT sector, which is declining. So what other sectors, what other clusters that can we develop that helps us start to diversify and create good jobs? In particular, we think we've got some really strong opportunity collaborating with the University of Reading, amongst others, those, for example, the creative industry, particularly that investment in Shinfield Studios, the expertise that's in the University of Reading and other key players. We think there's a really important cluster for us that we should be developing and supporting. We also think that there should be a stronger business innovation culture and greater support to our businesses. We've actually starting to see now, with a trend now that's going on a few years, so concerning as a trend, is that there are more business deaths than business births. So not suggesting, yes, sort of a kind of vibrant, regenerating economy. So we need to think about that business base. We need to think about supporting those businesses with high growth potential. We need to be thinking around how do we engage with our more strategic businesses so that they're engaged in the process they're thinking about, and that they can attract and support local businesses. So quite an important component there. A really key one is improving their skills and employability and tackling those inequalities. As I've said, we've got quite a cohort of people where there'll be a range of barriers. So we need to make sure we've got a skills strategy, an employment and strategy that supports those more vulnerable people into work, and think through broadly how we can support those, and particularly connecting into those jobs and those good jobs that hopefully we'll be creating through the other actions earlier on in the strategy. And then the final bit is supporting our place and infrastructure. So although not completely new to the area, as I said, I've worked here in the past, it was quite surprising to me as I sort of been looking around some of our business parks, which you'd expect to be good and vibrant, and particularly just to pick out, for example, the Thames Valley business park. There are big occupiers, Microsoft, Oracle, really global names, big present, big footprints, but actually, not that many people on the site. So, one of our premier business parks, when you go to it, actually, I think is not as vibrant as it could be. It's not selling this area as well as it could be. So what can we do? And I think, having talked to one or two of the business, the occupiers on there, I think there's a role, for example, for the council to play quite a facilitating role to help support and think through how do we start changing the nature of those business parks. So that's just one example of why the place and infrastructure remains important. So really, those are the sort of bones of the strategy. This is the headline, the objectives. What is it we're trying to do, and what we'd move on to if that's approved following the January exec, would then to be moving into an action plan development. And I think particularly with that more inclusive economic approach. So yes, thinking about supporting our businesses, creating the jobs and ensuring we've got good, fair jobs and sectors, that we're not as sort of concentrated on the IT sector, but also then how we link our population, our people, our communities into those jobs through a really strong skills plan. I think we should be thinking more about this strategy needs to not only look inwards, but also outwards, because we have a lot going on in and around ourselves. So we've got the Berkshire economic strategy, we've got the government's industrial strategy just coming through, and we need to make sure we're aligned and playing our full part in that, so that any opportunities, any opportunities for funding, for grants, that we're bringing those to the area of well thought through actions and plans. And finally, as I said, we're also just starting to think through what that creative sector might look like. How can we embed that here in Wokingham? How can we create that stronger cluster? And that work with the University of Reading is just being kickstarted. So those are sort of starting to give you a flavour of some of the actions that we would get into. But really happy to take any questions, any thoughts, and definitely I'd like to hear from you. So I'll stop sharing now and pass back to Mark. Do you want if you want to say any more words?
No, I don't think I do. I mean, I think it's this is for sort of reflection, review, really, and any input would be valued, please.
Questions? I got Pauline, I got George, I got Mary Louise.
I noticed that you said at one point that the IT sector is declining. I wondered what your evidence for that is, seeing as the IT sector as a whole is growing like topsy, especially AI and cloud computing and cyber and all those sorts of things. I think the way they're working has changed, a lot more working from home, a lot less offices, but I don't think the industry is declining. So what's your evidence?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to also bring Dexing, because I think you've got the specific evidence on that.
So that's based on the number of businesses specifically within the IT industry and the different sections within the IT industry as well over a 5-year period. That does include some COVID data as well. So of course that skews things slightly, but there has been a decline in Wokingham. It's software businesses, and I don't have the other subsector to hand, but there has been quite a significant decline over those 5 years. You're absolutely right that those businesses are changing the way they work, and it might be the case, especially since it's tech, that a lot of those are startups that perhaps they fail off and fail quickly as a sort of prerogative of the industry to drive innovation. It might be that happened more so due to COVID than otherwise, and it is starting to go back towards those pre-COVID baselines, but there has been an overall decline over the last 5 years. It's not a unique to Wokingham issue necessarily either, but there has been a decline, and that's based on ONS data for the last 5 years.
So that's not my experience from the IT industry. If you look at the number of businesses, you might find they're consolidating. So there might be more activity going on, but less companies doing it. Global IT spending, thanks to ChatGPT, is increasing by 8% a year. There is a lot of investment there. I mean, I know an awful lot of people who work in IT in this area. I don't see a reduction. And I would be very concerned if we tried to jump off the IT bandwagon, encourage it by all means, and diversify, because diversity is good. But I would really have a good look at your data.
Just adding to that, because I wondered, my follow-on to that, George, sorry to jump in, Mary-Louise, but I know that we've seen a fundamental shift in how people work and where they work and where office locations are built, which is always one of the great things with, Thames Valley Park was Bill Gates came to Reading, or Bill Gates came to Heathrow and said, I want an office within a 45 minutes drive of Heathrow, and when Reading looks good, which is why Microsoft came here. No, Thames Valley Park, I apologise. Early. I apologise. I'm sorry. I'll live that one down eventually in a few years. But the point of Thames Valley Park was Bill Gates coming over and going, I want somewhere 45 minutes that's not in central London. And then once Microsoft arrived, you then had Oracle came over. When Dell was looking for its first manufacturing facility, they came here because Microsoft was here. HP was here because everybody else was here. And I what I do see, and I agree with Pauline, is from my own perspective in the IT and networking part of the IT industry, there's still huge growth. I wouldn't want to diversify too far away from IT, because it still has, and the related services that go with it and what it does to the rest of the industries in Berkshire, I think it still has a massively important part to play. I think what we have seen, and sorry, I'm slipping back in time, Mark, but when you start looking at things over time, what we have seen is a huge growth in data center usage across the area, including the latest one that's just opened, funnily enough, where HP used to be based, which is an Amazon facility, even though it says warehousing outside it. And, I think we're seeing more of that. The other part of it was always sub-regional retail distribution because of the proximity to major networks in the port. So I think those are some of the worries that I've got if we're looking at IT as a declining industry. It might be declining in the amount of people that are here and companies that are here, which is more of a shift in working. I'm concerned also that the number of businesses that are extinguishing, we're shrinking rather than growing. But I have some concerns on the IT sector, especially as that was one of the strong foundational elements for the Silicon Valley of the country.
Yeah, I think one of the difficulties, it might get more and more difficult to measure it, because I've done business with a lot of the companies in Thames Valley Park for a long time. There are less and less of their employees actually on site. They're working from wherever they live. So you can't actually tell how many people are working in IT in this borough because you don't know. And it's the same with I was looking at the 5,000 workless households. According to ChatGPT again, if it's right, we've got 30,000 retired people. So in the borough. So if that's the case, I'm surprised 5,000 workless households isn't a bit higher unless you've taken retired out of it.
Could I just come back on a couple of those points? So yes, I absolutely think that digital, IT, AI are some of our really key strengths and present real opportunities. I think the point we're just sort of making was that there is a reduction, and probably the emphasis is on the amount that we rely on the IT sector for our economic base. But I completely agree, that there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of linkages into other sectors that we need to be supporting. So I completely agree. Just in terms of the retirees, so yes, you're quite correct. And if you look at the economic inactivity figure, quite a lot of that is made up by retirees. So or earlier retirees, so 16 to 64-year-olds is the span of age that looks at. And yes, there is quite a high proportion of retirees in those figures. So, part of that question is then, are they enough? We lost skills to the area. What implications does that have as far as? But yes, it is quite a part of the economic inactivity figure.
And I think the key thing with that is you've got to work out, just because they're not economically active doesn't mean they aren't paying tax. And you've also got to work out whether actually they want to work. If they've worked for 40 odd years, maybe they've earned enough money and they don't want to anymore. And that's their prerogative. I think there's a danger of taking these figures and assuming one thing without actually really understanding what's going on.
Do you want to come back on that? I'm just conscious that.
It was just a quick one. I don't think there's any assumptions here, Pauline. I really don't. But your Bill Gates point was a good one. I mean, at a whim, he could draw another circle and go somewhere else. I think that's the whole point. So if we make this a great place to live, a great place to do business, then maybe he won't do that.
George first, and then Mary Louise.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to just take us back to the business decline number. And so is that businesses that they're going bust, they're completely going out of business, or are they leaving Wokingham? Do you have sort of data or understanding on where those businesses are going? What's happening with them?
So that figure is looking purely at business counts, so it won't tell us whether they're moving specifically out of the borough or whether they're going bust. It will be a combination of the two. I agree with you. It would be good to understand which of those two things are happening. I do get the sense, specifically because it's the IT industry, that those that are failing relatively quickly are ones that will just have gone bust. Some might have moved outside of the area. Some of them may be startups, but that's something that we can look into further. It's just not in the actual business counts data as the INS has it.
Yeah, well, I think you understand why I'm sort of asking that. I think it's important to know, particularly as we're above the southeast average and the Berkshire average. It's important to know, are they going next door, because there's something slightly better next door. So I think that would be really good. And if you find that data, I'd love to see it at a later date. Staying on the businesses, on the ones that are here, is there a plan to engage with the businesses that are doing well to understand, are there any constraints to why they're not expanding, whether that be because they can't get the right staff, or they can't, they haven't got enough office space? So is there a plan to engage with those and see if there are some maybe easy wins there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we need to be doing more engagement with our businesses to learn those things. So yes, there's a plan and development to do that in the new year.
I'm just going to ask one more question before I pass on. On the employment number, so you give a comparison to Berkshire and the South East on other elements of the economic data. Do you have the comparison to Berkshire and the South East on the employment number? It shows a 4.9% decline, but do you know how that's sort of trending against our neighbours and other regions? Are we above, below?
I believe it's in the annex. If it's not, we are able to get it, yes, because that figure's published, of course, at Berkshire level and regional level as well. So if it's not in the annex, we can get that at a later date. I will double check that for you. But yes, that can be done.
Thank you.
Hi, Louise.
Thank you. Once again, as a one-trick pony, bringing out the question of, I was really pleased in here that you did speak about the impact of housing and the lack of affordable housing as one of the key constraints on economic development. But there wasn't really, it wasn't that strongly, developed in terms of what kinds of housing we need to expand the offer to developing businesses, because one of the things you can look at is the gap between the salariat and the precariat that we have now, that you have these two different ways of working. You have, people who have established jobs with in-work benefits, pensions, the whole 9 yards, and you have this group of mostly younger people working kind of short-term contracts, freelancing and so on. Now, they have historically, in the short term, been kind of the backbone of the IT industry, because those are the people that you recruit when you need to scale up. And then you pick and choose the best, you build with some of the best, and then they supposedly, turn into the salariat, but that doesn't happen as much as we would like. But, one of the things about Wokingham is because of the price of housing, it is absolutely unsustainable for somebody on short-term contracts, because the level of unsustainable debt that the young are faced with, including things like student loans and what have you, and the cost of housing, just means that, like, in my experience, IT companies who would like to grow, for example, entry level and mid-entry level, if you see what I mean, marketing positions and so on, they cannot recruit people because people on those kinds of contracts cannot afford to live here. So yes, build more housing.
Yes, thank you for that. Rhiannon, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a really interesting question, actually. And I think that some of the sectors that we're seeing, that some of our key sectors now, in addition to IT, such as the creative sector and the businesses around the film as well, those are short contract jobs that move with the productions as they come in, and it's a very different way of working. And obviously, with the growth in that area, they're looking at a big need in skills in those areas, and housing is a barrier for that recruitment. In terms of what we do in housing, and as you know, in addition to having economic development, in my team I have housing as well. Obviously, we're trying to increase the amount of affordable housing that we have available for people to make housing more affordable, but also we're looking at developing key worker housing as well. But I think the scale of the issue really needs to be better understood, and it is a growing issue, I think. So I think it's something that we just need to keep a careful watch on.
Just a little footnote to what Rhiannon said in relation to key worker housing, which is something that we definitely need more of, and your diagnosis of the problem is absolutely compelling. It isn't just the IT sector, of course, it's other sectors. So we know onto the Thames Valley Science Park, the University Science Park are coming, the Natural History Museum, the British Museum, Kew. Early career researchers in those institutions will want to move to this area. They're paid pretty low salaries. Their opportunity to actually purchase a house or even rent on the market is pretty limited. So key worker housing would be very appropriate if we can secure that in proximity to areas where people are likely to be working, so we can plan where to put this kind of key worker housing. I hardly dare say it, but when we brought our affordable housing strategy to this committee last year, or 2 years ago, I think it was. And I raised the point about key worker housing. There was an objection. I'm afraid it was, yes, who said that he wanted the housing for local people and not encouraging people to come into the area. I don't think, we tried to balance the competing demands of people locally who need new housing and can't afford it through the market, with the needs of the local economy, which is to be able to recruit appropriate staff who may not be able to afford the housing that they need in this area. So we're trying to balance the two. And despite Andy's criticisms, we're still committed to key worker housing.
I feel that I need for future for the future harmony within the Labour group to make the point that it shouldn't be either or. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing where one of the problems that we have had with housing is that it seems like a zero-sum game because we have so little opportunities. We don't want to make it a fight between, people, local people who need and deserve adequate, decent housing and the economic needs of, I think, particularly to do with the creative industries, that's something that, you can engage with industry leaders themselves. That is a specific area where they should be, more involved. But so it's not like an either or thing. I think if you have a more expansive, it's also about, and it's not just about building houses. We also need to look at private landlordism and a whole range of other things that can bring down the price of and the necessity for private renting. But yes, so
I agree entirely that it shouldn't be either or, it can be both. And of course, in some instances, those key workers can be local. So, for instance, some of the activities going on the University Science Park, like Shinfield Studios, we're encouraging Shinfield Studios to make connections with local schools so that will bring through a local labour force in future years. That local labour force may go into a variety of jobs. Some of them will not be high paid and they will need support in housing. So I agree entirely. These things can be both achieved if we go about it the right way.
Jane.
I did an assembly in a local school last week and I was struck by the number of children from Hong Kong. And I'm guessing that helps explain the increased demographics. And I just wonder if as part of this work, we've considered the skill set that the changing demographic brings into the area.
Yes, thank you. I think that's a really important point, and we are, as we move forwards, and particularly through that skills strategy, which will be a subset, if you like, of this, we will be definitely picking up those sort of changing demographics and the implications of that. So that's another piece of work. But yes, thank you. It's a very important point.
It's a really good point, that. The one thing that it reminds me of is when we were knocking on doors during the general election, there were quite a few people from the Hong Kong community who couldn't use their Hong Kong qualifications to do the jobs that they had done in Hong Kong here. So again, they were struggling. Some of them were struggling for foreign language courses, and that they said it was quite difficult to get them in Wokingham. And the second thing was that some of the people who did speak very good English couldn't. For instance, one of them I talked to was a teacher. He was a qualified teacher in Hong Kong, but he couldn't teach here because he didn't have recognised qualifications. So that might be something else we look at as well to try and help those people. Thank you for mentioning that.
Dave.
Hi. So my experience of working is pretty vibrant in terms of businesses. I've incorporated probably 4 or 5 businesses this month for either new or existing clients. So I'm seeing quite a lot of activity even in the run up to Christmas We started one today, so I think there's a lot going on, and I think the success of success of Wokingham as a ongoing thing. It's all about creating an environment that allows innovation to flourish, allows startups the support they need to flourish, and also has mechanisms to help scale ups as well. I think both locally and nationally, we're not very good at supporting scale ups, particularly. We're okay with startups, but definitely scale ups I think we need to improve on, and it's all about getting that environment right. And if the environment is sufficiently appealing, the demand will naturally follow, and you're creating that environment for innovation. And a quick question, business improvement districts, what are your thoughts on them, and do you think we should have more of them, and do you think they're a good mechanism for creating stronger business communities?
Yeah, so just on to your first point, I call them innovation ecosystems, and I think definitely there's scope to strengthen and create that environment, as you say, for scale ups. We might sort of talk about business improvement districts, particularly as it relates to the town centre when we get onto that strategy in a moment. So yes, I think there's a place for them. I'm not sure of the history here, so I think it's something potentially to examine. I guess that's something that we can pick up through the action plans and test the waters as to whether or not there's an appetite for that.
Did you want me to come in on the business improvement district? We did. Before we did the town centre regeneration programme in Wokingham, we did explore the possibility of doing a bid at that time, and as you probably are aware, we have to get the support of the local businesses to really make that work. And at that stage, it wasn't successful. I think that the body of businesses in the town at that stage wasn't sufficient to make it a goer. But I think it's something that we would probably like to revisit now that the town has been regenerated and we've got a lot more businesses that have been set up in the town. So something that we definitely like to explore going forward.
Yeah, there are other opportunities as well. We talked about Shinfield Studios, if they were prepared to get involved with a Shinfield and early bid. We've got new employers there, and you can also, obviously it's based on business rates, but we could also encourage on a voluntary basis businesses that do work from home that don't to sort of join on a voluntary basis and get involved in making that business community more vibrant.
Thank you. We'll take that away.
Just adding to that, I mean, I've got a lot of experience with bids over a long period of time, and the effort. Sorry, Ryan, I didn't introduce you earlier. I'm really sorry. Ryan, give me a wave, thank you. Yeah, so the problem is the economy of scale, really. So you have to get enough to give you the funds. But we're pushing against open doors all round with that. I tried one with Woodley recently, and we just couldn't get that economy of scale. But if we can push out the Shinfield Studios, if we can take early to Shinfield, that's quite good. I like that.
Yeah. Maybe the start's making sure that the vision is right in terms of what people see and what they're getting, and then from the vision, maybe start with less ambition and grow it gradually.
Yep, take your point.
Caroline.
Thank you. It's not so much a question, it's more about speaking up for the pensioners. You say they're economically inactive, you'll find most of them do volunteer. So we are putting something back, and I also volunteer. So it's not so much a question, but say you think you're losing the skills, but the skills are staying in Wokingham.
I just coming in there, I think that's the assumption that you're making, maybe Pauline made earlier. We're making no assumptions, we're just reporting the facts. Yeah.
George.
I might be about to stray into the town centre, but I'll try not to. I just wanted to touch on the new commercial areas that are coming forward, such as the Arborfield District Centre, and what work you're doing and how they're going to play into creating those local economies. So, for example, in the district centre, you're going to have a lot of retail in there, but are you sort of monitoring what the plan is to to have there and what impact that would have. And at the same time, when we have these new development locations like Ardfield Green, Finchwood Park, that all over the borough, are you understanding why people are moving to Wokingham, and if they are coming because of work, if they're moving here and then commuting out of the borough, and how that plays within the people that are moving here?
Thank you for that. Maybe some of that question, Nikki could pick up more in terms of the town centre work, but I do think there's some more analysis we need to look at about those inflows and outflows of people, and I think if we can perhaps dig a little bit deeper, I think again it's something we'll explore as to see if we can get any richer understanding of why people are coming to the air. So we'll definitely pick that one up. The wider question about what are we doing, I don't know whether or not, Nikki, I don't know to bring you in, or whether or not just we hold that question if possible until you've done your presentation, because it really does. It really does sort of help in that creating communities, doesn't it, Nikki, that the work you've been thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, we can touch on it a bit later, but yes, in terms of I guess how we're going to support those new emerging towns, that's I guess really why we structured our strategy in the way we did in the end, in that we have an overarching framework, and then what we'll effectively do is plug in town centre strategies as new towns come forward. So the strategy sort of sets the framework of actually, this is what's important, this is what will happen for every town. And then, as I said, as those new ones develop, and yes, I through my work with Section 106 and skills and employment, etc., we do keep an eye on what is happening with those new plans coming forward. And at the appropriate time, we would start engaging around what that might look like as a town and how we can support in terms of that development. I hope that answers that.
I think we'll just sure it's covered.
Yes, I mean, Chair, could we use this as a tenuous link to go into town centre strategy? I mean, it might be a good opportunity. I don't want to lose Nikki while she's on a flow there.
Are there any other questions on this part? Because I think the next step then is we will come back. I think on email, if we can copy all any feedback anyone has specifically that we've not covered off, that can get covered through Liam. And then Liam, if I can ask you if you can kind of collate that and then share that round with the committee. Timescales, Mark, this is going to exec for approval.
Yeah, really, it's the end of the year, which isn't very long, but it is, anything we will be taking into account. But it's going to exec at the end of January. Yeah.
Okay. Couple of quick points, and then we'll move on to the next bit. Just in here about making sure we're bringing out the digital aspects for the area. I speak as someone that lives in part of the village in Crowthorne that has no real decent connectivity beyond 3 or 4G. 5G doesn't seem to be rolling out beyond the major urban areas for us. Interestingly, when I spend time in the Canaries, I can get a 5G signal line of sight 3 miles offshore. I can't get a 5G signal in my own village. So I think there's that one. The other one is the rollout of ultra fast full fibre broadband. I know there's two separate things. We made a mistake in the country of not going for full fibre. We went for ultra fast. So I'd like to get an update on that and see how that fits into the strategy. And then, or the plan rather, the action plan. And then the final part, which is the much bigger, stickier one, is transport links. We did see a huge amount of people moving out of London to this area during COVID and now trying to commute back in. We now finally have the rolling stock appearing on South Western Rail, God knows how many years late. Costs of transport to London. If I go from Crowthorne to Reading to Paddington, I think it costs me 50 or 60 pounds. If I drive to Maidenhead, it costs me 28, I think. So I think transport links to London and the airport is a big thing. I've noticed that Rath has been mentioned again by 2 of our MPs. I was a big supporter of Rath when that was on. I'm also a big supporter of Southern Rail Access, which looks like that might get delivered in my lifetime. So I think transport connections into the area, networking, broadband, IT, phone, etc. Not helped by the fact, of course, that many businesses around here are starting to rely on satellite connectivity, and Starlink has no capacity in the southeast of England. So those are a couple of things just to cover off. I got Stephen, I got Pauline, then we'll move on.
Just a very small point, really, in relation to what you've just been saying, Mark. I guess we need to view our own economic development strategy in association with the Berkshire economic strategy, and all of the work going on through the Berkshire Prosperity Board and the new business board that's just been established, and recognise that this is part of a bigger picture. Yes. And there were very important references in what Karen was saying about the importance of the University of Reading. And again, this fits in with the work streams that we've established through the strategic partnership with the University of Reading, which is bearing fruit, I think, really very encouragingly. So there's lots of work going on beyond this, which addresses some of the issues you're talking about, especially those connectivity issues. There's a work stream on infrastructure projects that cross the boundaries of different Berkshire authorities.
Final comment, Pauline, and then we'll move on.
It was just on your comment about networks. It's not just places like Crawthorne that have never had decent connectivity. Places, from what I can see from talking to residents, places like Shinfield and Earley used to have good mobile connectivity, and I think it must be saturated. My suspicion is the M4 is taking all the capacity off the, and there isn't enough capacity. So it would be very interesting if the economic development guys could have a word with the big mobile phone operators and ask them what the heck they're playing at, because I think it's getting worse and worse and worse.
Great. Thank you very much. We'll move on. So comments back to Liam, ideally by the end of this year, so they can get rolled into the final version. And then Liam, if you can collate. Thank you to all those on the phone that are presented on this topic. I think this is a really thorough update we've had tonight with a huge amount of information. So I'm on behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank you for the massive amount of work that's gone into this really excellent comprehensive document. I think we're all looking forward to the next and the action plan and the trackable actions that come from it. If you want to stay, feel free. If not, happy Christmas, and you can log off. And we'll move on now to the town centre update. Back to Mark.
Well, I've done all the introductions, including Rhiannon. So next up is Nikki, please, town centre strategies.
Okay, so I'll share my screen. Okay. So I think, as I kind of just briefly sort of said earlier, I know I sent you quite a few documents because what we decided in the end to do was kind of separate things out. So we have a framework to begin with, which sets out, I guess, our overarching sort of principles and values for us for what we think across any of our towns. And then, as I said, what we will do is bring forward different town centre strategies at appropriate times. So to begin with, I've also sent you information on the first three. So we thought we would start with Wokingham, Twyford and Woodley, with a plan later on in the year that we can then look at some of those others that I mentioned in the framework and any other new ones that come forward. So if I just move. Oh, sorry, for some reason my screen seems to have froze slightly. Okay, right. So what I thought is just talk you through a little bit, because I can't sort of cover everything on the presentation. So I'm hoping, as I said, you've had a chance to have a look at some of the paperwork anyway sent through. But in terms of how we got to where we did, some of the engagement, I thought it'd be important maybe to talk through with you. So in terms of our engagement with businesses, we launched some business surveys across the three towns. We also took our ideas and had conversations with Wokingham Independent Business Association Group, with the Woodley Business Club. We also had some focus interview time with FSB to kind of see what they think. And also to try and encourage people to complete our survey and have some individual conversations. We actually, as a team, mainly thankfully to Gary, we actually visited about 80 plus shops to encourage them to talk to us, to look at the survey and to feed into things. We also did a launch event where we engaged with quite a few businesses as well to kind of say, look, we're doing this survey, we're doing this strategy, we really want to understand your views. In terms of community, to find out what residents want from their towns and what's important to them, again, we launched a survey and we had about 540 people complete that. Now, whilst I appreciate compared to our population that's a relatively small snapshot, however, 540 did give us some insights. And what we did also was we cross-referenced that with the survey that the Woking, for example, Town Council had done, just to see whether it aligned and there were any new themes coming through. We also looked at all the community vision notes. I think there was some discussion around going out and doing consultation with some of those community groups, but I think there was a feeling that they probably had a lot of consultation already through the community vision. So what I did was I actually looked at all those notes and pulled out any bits that were relevant to the town centres and followed up with some conversations. We also had some focus groups with some of our tenants to kind of, again, get an understanding of what they think. And then internally, you know, we've worked with our public health quite closely. We've worked with Place and Growth, Children's Services, just really to make sure that, because one of the things that is, as I'm sure you're aware, is the town centre touches literally everything. It encompasses every sort of, I guess, sector of our society, and every other service within our council kind of touches on it. So it was really important that this strategy and our framework actually had been checked with those other teams, and everybody had an opportunity to feed into. And also in terms of our town council, our town councils and village councils have been really, really helpful. So, you know, I've worked really closely with the officers at Wokingham Town Council, at Woodley Town Council, and the village Twyford team. So they've been really helpful at kind of helping me sense check and looking at some of the data with me to kind of say, look, you know, this data tells me this, but actually what's the story behind it? So they've been really, really helpful in helping me shape it. Okay, so from all of that, we've come up with, I guess, these sort of principles that, as I said, sit on the framework and really underpin everything that we believe in and we're going to do. So firstly, town centres that help everyone to thrive and where everyone feels they belong. So this again really sort of sings, I guess, and aligns with a lot of the work around wanting to be a Marmot borough and around our building blocks of health. We've then also got supporting businesses to create ecosystems for sustainable growth. So again, it's that whole understanding of, you know, without our town is nothing without the people, but it's also nothing without those businesses. So we need to nurture them and support them. And then working towards carbon neutral town centres, obviously being sustainable and working towards carbon neutrality is a really key theme for us as a council. And then working in partnership to celebrate the individuality of our towns. We know that our towns are different. One size is not going to fit all, and it's really important that we represent that and we respect that in anything we do. But it's also an understanding that, you know, we can't do this to our towns. We need to do this with our towns, and it's all about that collaboration and understanding what they think and what they want and working with them to find the solutions. So these are the priorities. I'm not going to go through them all. I can if we want to, but what I thought was it might take quite a while to go through each of these, so I want to leave plenty of time for you guys to come and ask me any questions, but I'm happy to go through them if people want me to. So then it's like, what are we going to do once we've actually got this strategy hopefully in place? Well, as I said, a key cornerstone of this is about that partnership and how we work together. So we will create a steering group, and that steering group will have representation from our portfolio holder, from town and parish councils, from town and parish officers, local businesses, those community groups, and internal officers. It's really important that that is a wide steering group that cuts across all those different groups and has their voice there for us to kind of work together. And what we'll do is we will then have a delivery plan and we'll agree those work streams, and this group will then hold us to account. There will also be under those work streams, there'll be different work stream theme leads, and they will all feed into the overarching steering group. And I think, again, what we're hoping that group will do, as I said, is one, hold us to account, but it'll also, because it will have representation across all 3 towns and any new towns that end up coming into our town centre strategy programme, actually what I'm really hoping is it's an opportunity to share good practice amongst them, and it's an opportunity for the towns to collaborate. If one of our towns has a great idea and is doing something, actually, why can't we share that idea? Why can't we replicate it? Why can't we share resources? So it's about, I think, bringing everybody together. I think also one of the things that we hear a lot from the town is about actually, you know, some of those people, some of those businesses, they have the solutions, or at least they want to be part of the solution to any problems. So actually, you know, when we need to do things, when we have policies that might impact the town, we'll have that forum and we'll have that space to be able to take those to them, to build that partnership and to have those conversations together. We'll produce regular reports so that we are holding ourselves to account and saying this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing against those work streams. And what we're also hoping from this is that actually, you know, we have been in a really good place and we have a really good data set to be able to apply for funding. You know, there are funding out there externally from arts councils, community funding grants, things like that, that hopefully we'll be able to collectively apply for that funding to be able to use in our towns to hopefully regenerate and support the growth of the businesses. So just a quick sort of timeline. So we're here with you today to get your feedback. We're then going to be working on our terms of reference and who is going to be the membership of that group and what does that governance structure look like. In January, I hope to have our initial first meeting. We'll agree our work streams and we'll put together our delivery plan. We'll also then obviously hopefully be formally adopted as a strategy. And then what I hope is in February, we'll be able to formally launch that plan. But I also want to do it with a communications strategy that really also highlights everything, you know, is good about our towns, everything that we've done so far and all the really positive, because I think our towns have an awful lot to offer. And I think it should be something we celebrate. And that's what I'm hoping for this town centre strategy, that really it's kind of this is where it starts. The town centre strategy is just the beginning. This is us saying, right, this is our commitment. This is what we want. This is what we believe. Let's work together to make it happen. Okay, so I'll stop sharing my screen and hopefully take lots of questions.
Questions? Dave?
Hi, there seems to be quite a big emphasis on the north of the borough here. Early's got a population of 36,000 in comparison with 7,000 in Twyford. So why is that emphasis very much more on Twyford than, say, Early? And if you factor Chinfield, obviously, which neighbours Early, into that, we're talking sort of over 50,000 people.
Yeah, no, and it's a really good point. And Lower Early will probably be the next town centre strategy that we look to do. We started with those three, but that doesn't mean to say we're not going to look at Lower Early. And that's why in the end we decided to do it as this framework so that we can then look at Lower Early and any others that come forward.
I think I wouldn't focus just on, I think you need to focus on Early as a whole. It's not just Lower Early, there's a shopping centre, a group of shops on the Woking Road in Early, and then there's shops in North Early as well, which butt into Woodley. So don't just focus on Lower Early, it's only part of the picture.
And absolutely. I think one of the things that I guess potentially a follow-on piece of work that we need to look at is it's really defining what is a town centre, because you know there are lots of little parades of shops and they're really important. You know, those local parades of shops actually serve our community really well. For those people that perhaps are not able to access getting into a town, they have a really important strategic role to play in our borough. But are they town centres? So I think it's really important that we sort of make that distinction, but we offer support for all of that, but it's on what level and under, I guess, what category. Because, for example, if we're thinking a town centre and we're thinking about bringing events and we're bringing about arts and culture, we're probably not going to bring that to a parade of shops. But that doesn't mean to say we shouldn't be supporting that parade of shops. It just might be a slightly different type of support.
Any more? George?
Just want to touch on the footfall data that looking through further down the pages that we have. There's a shift where it says that people are staying for less time. Have you got any understanding on why that might be?
In which town is that?
So I think I'm looking at Wokingham. Yeah. So I'm looking at Wokingham. It says majority of visitors do not stay longer than 90 minutes. While this was also the case before the pandemic, there's been an overall shift towards shorter stays in general, with more people staying in the town for shorter periods of time.
Yeah, so I've had some chats with the town council about this, and as I said, and other people and some businesses to try and understand, because I find the footfall data really fascinating, and you can get lost in going down it and trying to understand it all. And I think, ultimately, I don't know exactly why. Some of the changes I've been able to see, so for example, there's a shift in the time of people coming that I think we've managed to figure out in Wokingham, but the fact that people are coming shorter, no, it's not something I fully understand at the moment.
It is actually a pattern, I think, in all three, but certainly it's a pattern that's quite marked in Twyford, which is very interesting.
There was some real
explanations, the explanations may differ in each of the centres, but it's a common theme.
I think there's a lot in Twyford. Actually, people are staying longer in Twyford. That was the real strange thing for Twyford. People are staying for a much longer period of time. And what we're seeing, one of the shifts that we're seeing in Wokingham is actually there's an increase between 3 and 6. And actually, when I've had some chats again with the town centre and people like that, we think what that might be. But again, it is speculation. But that's what's really interesting about this. You can speculate all the way around it. I think one of the things that could be is actually we think that the school nearby, there's been a change, I think, in the transport that was offered for children from that school. So what we think is actually more children are walking through the town between 3 and 6. And what that sort of tells us is actually there's potentially an opportunity for those businesses to be offering more services for young people. So that then works in a twofold way. One, in that, it's an opportunity for businesses to generate more income, but also we know that we need safe spaces for children. We know that our children don't always feel representative and have a voice in our town. So actually, knowing that we've got an increased population of children walking through between 3 and 6, there's an opportunity to start thinking about what those services we could develop that would potentially capture those people coming in.
And sorry, Chair, there's a great example of this in Twyford. The Golden Cross pub has actually got the train times on the bar so that you can have another pint and still catch your train.
I think that's brilliant. Yeah.
I'm not sure that necessarily. I was going to say, I'm not sure that directly connects to the children walking past between 3 and 6, but I see where you're going.
It's the portfolio of business, isn't it?
I'm pulling your leg, George.
Yeah, I just wanted to continue sort of down that line on the footfall. I think, looking at the data that you've been gathering from resident feedback, several residents have been talking about car parking charges, and you reference in here that there hasn't been an impact on footfall. And although that might be right, maybe that's in your numbers, clearly people are staying for less time. So I would be interested to know, if you're digging into that, are people shopping for less time because of that reason? I'm seeing a link. I suppose I don't want to open the debate about that because I've got a view about this, and I can already feel Stephen to my side wanting to say something. But I'm just going to continue on a little bit about this. It's more of a point than a question. I wasn't really looking for a response. On the evening piece, again, I'm sort of quite surprised by how low that is, seeing we've got the regeneration of the town centre and there's loads of interesting places to go eating and drinking, more than there was several years ago. So again, I think there's something there that I'd really like to understand what's not working, because we've got loads more restaurants and places to eat and drink, and we've got the cinema, a great cinema we didn't have so many years ago. So again, would be really interested to see what's holding that part back. One other point that I just wanted to make, moving on to crime, you referenced the difference between the numbers and maybe the feeling. And so I got together with a load of businesses at the beginning of the year just to understand what was going on. And the number one thing that they're talking about is shoplifting. And we had a presentation from Thames Valley Police at the last main council. I know the TVP are doing a good job at trying to tackle it, but I really don't think that the numbers are actually representative of what's going on in the ground. I do think there is, sort of anecdotally, there is more, but maybe less is being reported. So I just wanted to make that point, because I think you are right. There are more incidents, but they're not being represented in the data.
And I agree with you, because as I said, when you talk to the businesses, what they say doesn't line up with what's reported. And also, you know, the police did a survey relatively recently to businesses, kind of saying, you know, like, tell us what you think is happening, and tell us what systems you've got in place to, you know, support you with it. And we had actually a really, really poor uptake of that survey from businesses. And actually, thank you to Mark, because I've raised that to Mark, and I think you went and put your trainers on and went and had a chat with quite a few businesses. And then actually we did see an increase of numbers actually feeding in. But one of the frustrations that the police were sort of sharing with me was, you know, we want to help, we want to do more. But if what we're seeing is, you know, our numbers tell us there's not an issue, but we all know it's more than it is. But if we don't have that data, we don't have the evidence, it's hard for them to address it. But they've also done some work, you know, we've had some sessions and the businesses haven't turned up. So I think there is a real piece of work that again, you know, out of the town centre strategy, I would want us to look at is we need to support the businesses more. We need to work with the police more in joining that up. And I don't know what the answer is, but there is something there about helping them. They have things like the DISC system, which is a way of sort of sharing information and reporting, but they don't all use it. And if it's not used, if you know, it's not very good if only 3 or 4 businesses are on it. You need all your town to be on it for it to be an effective mechanism. So there's definitely more work we can do to help make that connection.
Mark, briefly, because I think he wants to come back, and then Steve.
Okay. No, I mean, summing up Nikki's approach there, it's enabling business to lead. Sometimes business doesn't put its head above the parapet when it should, but sometimes we don't encourage that. So enable business to lead, and we'll get there.
I wanted to thank, obviously, Nikki for all the work she's put in on this, but also Mark, because I think you really have tried to make sure businesses are much more engaged in this process, and I think we benefited from that enormously. I did need to just come back on George's point, although I don't want to prolong a debate on this, but it is complicated, isn't it? Because of all those 3 centres we've so far got in our town centre strategy, Twyford has actually experienced the least bounce back since the pandemic. It has a 2-hour free car park in the centre, run by Waitrose. It has a very small council owned car park, which isn't used for shopping or any of the other facilities in the village centre. So it isn't an easy equation, I think. It's a much more complex picture. And I do think we have to recognise that things have changed quite dramatically since the pandemic. And that's kind of turbocharged the move to online shopping. And that is the biggest threat to our town and village centres. Online shopping has really undermined them in lots of ways and forced a kind of reconfiguration of what they do. So there's a lot more emphasis on things you can't get online, or you can compete at least with online. So there's lots of barber shops, I've noticed, lots of nail shops, lots of restaurants, pubs, cafes, lots of things, in other words, that suggest that we're seeing a change, a fundamental change in the way town and village centres work. Much more to do with leisure, entertainment, and service, and less to do with shopping.
George.
I just wanted to come back on one point on that, Stephen, and I think you're right about it's very difficult with the data, but if we look at what we've got in front of us, residents have been asked several times, it's popped up, difficulties in parking or increased car parking charges. What would you like to see? reduced car parking charges, residents felt cost of parking was a barrier. So, I understand it's a very difficult one to work out. Wokingham's got a Waitrose as well that also offers free parking. You can go and park in Aldi and buy a chocolate bar and you get 90 minutes free parking. Cheaper for me to go and buy a chocolate bar for 90 minutes than to put an hour in the meter. So, but if I go back and look at the data we're presented in this here, even if I didn't wander around the town centre and talk to people all the time, I would say I'd be questioning what's this problem with parking, because it's clearly a theme in this report. But I get what you're saying about the challenge, and I think you're right about the changing town centre. We just need to make sure that we're on the right ride and don't miss it.
I think that's the fundamental point on which we can all agree, that this is about how do we support our town and village centres in this period of transition from one kind of functionality to another. And I think we're not going to be able to turn the clock back. We're not going to be able to revive and reconfigure how they were in the past. I think we've got to try and help them in that process of adjustment.
That's why Mark had his trainers on. He had to run around quickly before the car parking charges got too high.
Oh, ouch.
I'm not going to be provoked any further.
Can I just say, with the car parking charges, it's all of our businesses that I met with the trainers. I only live up the road. They all say we've got to change that narrative. They actually don't believe. I mean, our new chair of our business association is Rory from Pratt's Pods in Wokingham. He's a great young lad, half my age, and he's got a vibrant business. And he says it's nothing to do with the car parking charges. You've got to change the narrative. So please don't lead that narrative.
Caroline, and then we'll move on.
Thank you. It's just a quick one. When you're talking about businesses, some of them not be involved, from past experiences, were the independent shops and businesses more likely to come to meetings and get involved rather than the bigger ones? Larger.
Are you saying in the past or now? Sorry.
I'm saying in the past, when I used to go to the business meetings, yes, that's where I met you. And it seemed to be that the independents would come along, including me, but the big ones like Boots are in the town centre, never sent a representative. And I just wondered if that's carried on.
No, I don't think it has. I mean, I've had many a go over lots and lots of years of getting a business association on the move, and we've had peaks and troughs. But when we met, Nikki, you were there, I think, in Woodley. I mean, nobody's mentioned Woodley. We had both Waitrose there. It was really quite good, and a lot of the bigger businesses. And if you can get them all, and that's where a business improvement district comes in, interacting, there's quite a lot that goes on there. Can I just say about Woodley, actually, they are the cutting edge of feeling part of the community. The Woodley Town Centre, after COVID, it's recovered much quicker than the other two or maybe three or four. So Woodley needs a mention.
I'm going to move us on. Although I do agree with Dave about the business improvement district, and one of the tricks that, granted this was business rather than retail led, but getting Waitrose were a massive supporter of a local business improvement district, and that pulled a lot of other people into the conversation, especially as they were paying the lion's share of the precept. Okay, so again, same as the previous one. If you've got comments to any of the other documents we haven't captured this evening, feeding back to Liam. Same timescales, Mark? Is this going to January?
Yes, please. Same. Yeah, they're travelling together, these two.
Perhaps rightly so in many cases. So I think if we can, any comments back before end of the year? So a little light reading over the Christmas break, in addition to all the other reading. If not, can I just thank our officers for this? I mean, 2 comprehensive, detailed reports. They're really, really good. I know there's a lot more to come as they kind of move forward, but these are really amazingly good reports. And it's really great to see that. So thank you very much. Thank you for staying on for the evening. You have 2 items left. If not, happy Christmas. And you can log off, but feel free to stay.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
That's right. You're both welcome to stay. If not, happy Christmas. I was going to say. Oh, you got a quick run then. Right, we're going to move on to the last two items on the agenda. Work programme and the action tracker. Just wanted to draw members' attention to the January planned meeting, as that's also an equally busy one. Happy Christmas to you. The January meeting is looking to be busy. I think we're maybe looking one or two items that may slip. We're just trying to find the programme to get that locked in and communicated. But January is also looking with some meaty items, one of which obviously is the mop up of all of the budget updates. And then it gets a little quieter. Any comments on that? Well, comparatively, Liam.
There's one item that has slipped since the agenda went out, or not slipped, but completely come off. The change in street works permits that's scheduled for March is not coming to scrutiny because the changes are already live. That obviously brings us down to 3 items in March and 6 in January. So we would be looking to try and even that out, so that it's 5 and 4. And from what you've previously said, Dave, because that's the first item that's gone since you made the comment, I will put an explanation as to why that's gone into next time. I don't necessarily have a detailed explanation as to why.
I mean, maybe it's just me, but it might be useful to know what's changed in the street works permits, just out of curiosity. I don't need to know now, but maybe
maybe we can
few lines
send around something just by email.
It was through licensing. Some of the function of changes came through the licensing committee. Yes. I think that's why it's not come here, because the change was agreed through licensing as opposed to going through exec. But an update would be useful, seeing as it's come off our agenda. George.
I was just going to suggest that the playing pitch strategy didn't get the kick, pardon the pun, because it already got the kick last time.
We wouldn't necessarily be suggesting to move that one any further back. No. We wouldn't be suggesting to move that further.
No balls into the long grass. Other sporting relating analogies. Any other comments on the work programme? Pauline.
We're going to lose something out of January. I would suggest probably the arts and culture strategy is not time critical.
Yeah, I'll feed back to officers and I'll let you know what the change.
I think I made a similar comment. I think we're just waiting for the next iteration to come around. So as soon as we know, I'll get that shared. Anything else? No. Okay. Final item, action tracker. Any comments, thoughts? Speak now, or ever hold your peace. No? Okay, brilliant. In which case then, keep turning my microphone off, wishful thinking tonight. If you can feed us back by the end of the year, and then we'll get those collated and shared around. If not, have a wonderful Christmas, and we'll see you all in the new year. Meeting closed.